This video demonstrates the process of setting up a homework assignment via the Code plugin on Canvas. Prior to working with code, it's a good idea to ensure that it is set up by navigating to the settings on the course, selecting the Apps tab, and viewing the app configurations. You should see the Code LTI as an option in one of the plugins that has been set up for this course. This is set up by the administrator, so you do not have much control on setting it up, but once it is set up by the administrator, it is available for use across all of the courses in that specific account. Next, before you can use it, the instructor must provide student role to themselves. For this, add yourself as a student to the specific sections or a combined section of the course. This is an important step, but it's a one-time step that you have to do for each course in which you would like to use the Code plugin. The next step in the process is to set up your assignment like you usually do and select the online as the submission type, and then ensure you select file uploads. Ensure you don't restrict file upload type so you can upload different types of files for your assignment. Once you select the file uploads, the students will have the option to choose Code plugin as a submission type and upload and submit their solution files as part of this assignment. Next, you can access the Code plugin by either clicking the Submit Assignment or Resubmit Assignment, and you will see an Upload via Code tab that is showed automatically to you. Here, you can set up all of the different settings and test cases for the assignment. And you can expand and collapse these panels by clicking on the title associated with each of these panels. Now let's look at the options that are available in the Settings tab for an assignment. The first option to select is the programming language that will be used for the programming assignment. Of course, the choice of the programming language determines the kind of compilers and tools that will be used to compile and assess the student submissions. So this is the first option that you would select. Currently, Code plugin supports C++ and Java as the two main programming languages, and other programming languages will be added as the need arises. Next, upload any of the files that are supplied to the students as part of the homework. This would include any test files, additional libraries or jar files that you're using, any input data files that you would like to supply for the homework assignment, all of those extra files that you would supply to the students, and any files that you would need for testing the student submissions, all of those should be uploaded here. You can click the Add Another File button there and add as many files as you need to the assignment submission. Note, keep in mind it is not enough to just upload the files as part of your homework assignment on Canvas. You will have to upload the files again here for the Code plugins used, because the Code plugin does not download files from Canvas. The next step in the process is to set up any extra flags that you would like to use to compile the program. Typically, you would supply the compiler flags that is associated for programming. For C++, we are using the GCC compiler, and for Java programs, we use the standard Open JDK for compiling and assessment of the solutions. Um, for example, in C++, some of the example flags are shown there, and you can also specify additional compiler and linker flags that are needed, and you would have to separate the linker flags with a pipe symbol as shown in this example. In the case of Java, if you have any additional Java compiler options or class path that you need to specify for using extra jars, those would be specified here. Next, set up the maximum number of acceptable compiler errors and warnings that are acceptable for this program assignment. In case the student program, when it is compiled, it generates too many compiler errors or warnings, those submissions will not be accepted as a final submission by the plugin. Typically, these compiler errors and warnings should be set to 0 so that students' program compiles without any errors or warnings when they submit it. Let's look at some more options that go with the homework submission here next. Style checking is an important aspect of programming, and style checking is expected in almost all industry jobs. Here, the code plugin uses the CSE department's style checking guidelines to check the style of the programs and solutions submitted by students. To enable style checking, check the check style checkbox and then set the maximum acceptable number of style errors that a student program can have. If the number of style errors in the student program exceeds this value, then the plugin will not accept their program as a final submission for this homework. And of course, the style rules that are run by the plugin depends on the programming language that has been set up and chosen by for this assignment. You can set up any short notes or additional messages or quick reminders to students just before they submit their homework solution. This note is displayed to the students when they try and submit their final solution. Let's look at how to configure a test and set up tests via the code plugin. You can add tests by clicking the Add Test button, and once you have added a test, you would typically set up a short name for the test. This is just a name for general reference so that when it's displayed to you and the students, it has some meaningful name associated with it. Ensure that the enable checkbox is checked. If this checkbox is unchecked, then this test will not be run when the student uploads the program. This is just a convenience checkbox to quickly enable or disable tests that you would like to run on student submissions. Next, if you would like to share the detailed results from running this test case with students each time they upload a test, ensure that the show results to student checkbox is checked. If this checkbox is not checked, then the plugin will only display a summary result as to whether the test case passed or failed to the students. The next option is to show the results on unmute. This option displays the detailed test results to the students once the assignment has been unmuted in the code plugin. And this is an option that's convenient where you can hide the detailed results when the student submits it, and after grading their submission, you can then release the details of certain test cases to students once the assignment has been unmuted. Note that if both of these two options, that is show results to students and show results on unmute, if both the checkboxes are unchecked, then the students will never see the details of a test case other than the fact that they passed or failed that specific test. Like the name suggests, the ignore whitespace option, when it is checked, basically ignores white spaces, which are blank spaces, tabs, and new lines, when comparing the expected output of the test case versus the output generated by the student submission. Typically, this checkbox is left unchecked so that the students are able to generate solutions that meet the expected output, and they are generating precise output as expected. The next option is the must pass option. If this option is checked, then the student solution is expected to pass this test case before it is accepted as a valid submission. So this flag is useful for enforcing some mandatory tests or some base case where the student has to have some minimum functionality operating correctly before they're able to submit a solution for a homework assignment. The standard inputs that you would like to supply for the program is provided in the inputs text box. This is essentially data or inputs that would be read by the student program via system.in in case of Java or std.in in the case of a C++ program. The expected output for this test is provided or filled in the expected output box. And of course, these are the results that will be printed to system.out or std.cout by the student program. This information is the one that will be used to determine if the student submission is operating correctly and meeting the expected outputs for this specific functional test. Set the maximum acceptable runtime for this test. Typically, 5 seconds is a really long time for a test case and for most of the homeworks. And specifying a timeout is important to defend yourself against potential problems in student submissions, such as infinite loops or possible other issues that might cause the program to run too long. And these are issues that that the timeout can help you to defend against. You may also specify any optional command line arguments to be supplied. Note that this is optional, so if your program does not require command line arguments, you would not fill in any values here. You can also set an optional set of environment variables. The format of the environment variables is name equals value format, and you can specify multiple environment variables by separating by blank space. If an environment variable has multiple words in it, it needs to be within double quotation marks. So it's a pretty standard format for environment variables, and these are useful for certain types of submissions. For example, if you're using OpenMP for multi-threading, then here you could set up OpenMP options as environment variables for each test case. You may also specify any additional parameters for JVM, or if you're running an MPI program, these would be typically JVM options that you would use to increase memory space or stack space for a specific test case that you might be running. There are additional options that you might use, such as changing the order of tests. So you would basically run all of the mandatory or required tests first, and then run any optional tests that you would like to do. Of course, you may also delete test cases. Note that there's no undo option here, but in case you accidentally delete a test case, you will have to discard all of your changes by clicking on the cancel all changes button further down in this form and starting over with the changes that you would like to do. This essentially completes most of the setup that you would like to do for a assignment. Of course, you can add multiple tests, and once you have added all of your tests, make sure that you click the Save All Settings button at the end of the form. Note that saving settings updates various cross-references and internal structures in the database. So once those cross-references are updated, it does require rerunning all of the tests for the submission. So if some parts of the test has changed, that means all of the test case needs to be rerun. So if you have many student submissions and if you're making changes after students have submitted solutions, you'll have to retest all of their submissions. It does take some time to do it, but it's not too long. Nevertheless, it is best to set up all of these test cases and test to make sure they are set up correctly before publishing the assignment for use by students. In order to test cases, you can use the test submission option to validate these settings. And this test submission option from the instructor menu will let you make a test submission, and it'll go through the process as if a student has submitted the solution, and you'll be able to go through all of the steps and ensure that the test cases are operating correctly and the outputs, at least from your reference solution, is being generated correctly and is matching the expected outputs that you have set up for the different test cases. This essentially completes the setup of a homework assignment via the code plugin. Here's a summary of the things that were covered in this presentation. Keep in mind that code requires a one-time setting for each course where you have to give yourself a student role in order to use the plugin. This is how the integration with Canvas works for this specific plugin. And of course, when you set up an assignment, first set up an assignment like you normally would on Canvas, except you would have to ensure that you check the online submission option and you accept submissions via website URL. Keep in mind that you access the plugin via the submit assignment or resubmit assignment options that Canvas provides. These are the names of the buttons that Canvas provides. So initially it might seem a little confusing that you are accessing the setup for the assignment by trying to submit an assignment, but this is how the integration aspect works. Initially it might seem little awkward to do it this way, but after you use these options a few times, you'll become familiar with this tool and it'll seem pretty normal to go through this process. Thank you for watching this presentation, and we hope that the code plugin serves you and your students well on the long run.